Welcome everyone. If you would like to take your seats, we're going to get this event underway. All right. Welcome and thank you for putting your time aside on this beautiful evening to come and listen to our guest speakers tonight. We have this beautiful venue, so I would love to say thank you to the Beach Gardens and point out some housekeeping, which is the bathrooms are just up the stairs and to the left. I was going to point out the exits, but I don't think I need to do that tonight. So thank you to Jack Barr for this beautiful venue for this evening. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have Mayor Ron was not in attendance. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I would like to say a thank you to Paul Forsyth, who is a retired member of Parliament, who is working on our photography this evening, and he is also managing the Conservative office here in Powell River. Thank you. Thank you. The itinerary for tonight will have two speakers. We'll listen to our two speakers, and I'll introduce our local candidate in a moment, Chris Moore, and then we are very excited to have our BC Conservative Party leader, John Rustad, in attendance tonight. This is amazing. Thank you. I think we're making some history here that this is the first open invitation of a party leader in BC. So it's good to see the turnout. So I just wanted to add that because we do have a very limited time here tonight, we just ask that you would do respect-filled listening. And then that way we can get the most out of the information that you come to hear so that you can walk away with more knowledge and to apply to how you're going to vote in the election this fall. And I should introduce myself. My name is Suzette Stevenson. I'm your MC. I grew up on the coast in the 80s, and my husband and I started our family in the 1990s. Our children grew up, moved away for school and other work experiences, and then about 4 years they started coming back to raise their own families. And it was when I looked at my grandchildren and I looked around at the Sunshine Coast that I was seeing that I realized that I wanted the same opportunities for them that my children had had. And so I committed to getting involved in politics on a different level than I had in the past. I have always voted. So I started attending some meetings and I saw Chris Moore and I listened to him answer my questions as well as other people's questions. And I decided to sign up as a volunteer to work and support his candidacy. I was traveling up here yesterday with my husband and we were taking the ferry, as we often do, to Powell River to visit friends in your beautiful town. And there was a young person wearing a BC Sports t-shirt, and on the back was written the words, "Leave a legacy." And it was so poignant because that is what we're all doing this fall when we vote. We are leaving a legacy for the next generation. And so once again, I just thank you so much for setting the time aside to come here and respectfully listen and take away valid or gain information. And hopefully we will have a question and answer period at the end, and we will try to answer everyone's questions, but if there are any unanswered questions, Chris has offered to follow up with you. So we'll get to that at the end, but I would like to give the floor to our local Conservative candidate, Mr. Chris Moore.
Well, thank you, Suzette. That was beautiful. And thank you for my campaign team. I think a bunch of you folks all met them on the way in. They had the t-shirts on, and I can't express my gratitude enough for the work they've done in getting me to this stage. It's been amazing. And special thanks to Robin Murray, one of yours from Powell River. Finding individuals like Robin and Deb and these people are just, it makes such a difference in terms of your attempt to stand up. So anyway, I'm Chris Moore. I'm in the Seashells. I see lots of familiar faces. There's a number of people here that haven't met me. I'm a family man down there. I got 10 grandchildren on the Lower Coast. We have a small business called the cider business, Brecker Cider, and real estate land development. I've been on council, and just have a wonderful life in the Lower Coast. Although I have fallen in love with Powell River, and I went to the Fireman's Barbecue at Texada on Monday, and that was first class. I gotta say, what a great job they did. Beef brisket like I've never eaten in my life. So thanks to those guys. Just quickly, before we get to the main event, people ask me why I bother. And I think I said I had 10 grandchildren. And for the few people that I have spoken to in the past, I spoke about my grandfather that was in service in Passchendaele in 1917, and my father that served as a young 18-year-old in the North Atlantic in 43 to 45. And I guess this is my call to service. But the one person I forgot to mention in my last meetings was my mother. And as a young kid, we lived in a modest middle-class home in Winnipeg. One car. My dad was a bureaucrat, worked for the government. He was a wonderful civil service guy, took the bus to work. And we had 5 kids, and we had 1.5 bathrooms, and it was fun. And but every Christmas, my mother, about the age of when I was about 10, would say it's time to go down to the Winnipeg Christmas basket fund and work with the packaging food and taking food and presents out to other people. And of course, I had no idea what she was talking about, so I'd be about 11 years old or so. And we'd go down there, and we would pack groceries, and we'd pack presents, and we'd get in my mom's, she would drive us into the north end. And I would get out of the car with a package of groceries or a present, 35 below, traipse through the snow and go up to a house that was kind of shady looking and kind of scary as a kid, right? And the door would be open, and I'd see some children, or be some people in there, and they would invite us in, and we would walk in, and I would drop the bag of groceries and the present. Half the time I was scared, and the other time I was mesmerized because I was looking at this house and thinking, oh my goodness, people have to live like this. Anyway, we did this over the years, and the thing that it instilled in me was how well I was living and the kind of life my parents were providing for us, which was what we would consider very, how should I say, middle class today. It wasn't extravagant, but I saw the other side of the coin. But Mother always insisted that we look after ourselves individually, but we have an equal responsibility to community service. And that if more people put a hand up and a hand out, it makes the lifting easy. So this, in a way, is kind of dedicated, well, not just to my mother, her grandmother, who loved John Diefenbaker. So I like building community. I got some very close friends with me. We've been building community for many years. I got a large family. I got my sister-in-law here. Building community, and I'm scared about what's happening to our community. And that's why I'm serving today. So, I'm gonna find my glasses, sort of thing. I met big move in June, and I was incredibly surprised at the reception I was received when I moved over to the Conservative Party. And in particular, this gentleman that's sitting beside me, my wife attended when I went over to Victoria, and she was equally impressed with John. But I have to read this first. Anyway, John has been the leader of the Conservative Party. We all know that, right? And he's been working against the NDP and the radical ideology for quite some time. And they've done all the things that we are reacting to, the drugs in the streets, the crippling of the economy, and the cost of living. The three things you might not know is John was raised and born in Prince George, and he spent 20 years working in the forestry industry. And that's going to be great for all the people in here that got questions about how we're going to revitalize the forest industry. He got frustrated with the direction of the province and decided to stand up and fight it by running as an MLA in 2005. He's been an MLA since that time. He was the Minister of Aboriginal Relationships and Reconciliation, and he signed 435 agreements with First Nation. As you can imagine, 435. He's got some amazing history to tell you. More than any other Canadian politician in history. He became an independent MLA, and he joined up with the Conservative Party, which was established in 1903. Because he realized he needed to fight, and he can't do it alone. So, when I kind of got exposed to that, and I saw the conservative values, I asked if I could come over, and I was gratefully received. And here I stand today. So, as part of this team, I'm super thrilled to help him on this, with this fight, and I know all of you are going to help. So, without further ado, we're going to welcome Mr. MLA John Rustad, who is going to be the next Premier of British Columbia.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Chris. Boy, you know, I'm really pleased you got my former title right, because a lot of people, when they introduced me when I was the Minister for Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation, would confuse the federal title with the provincial title. And so when they did that, of course, it would be an interesting mix, and the best one, I think, was I was the Minister responsible for Aboriginal Relationships and Affairs. So as you can imagine, thank you for getting that one right. Anyway, it's great to be able to be here in Powell River. Thank you so much for everybody coming out tonight. You know, I was so much looking forward to coming up here because this is such a beautiful area of the province, and it's certainly spectacular. Everybody living here, you know, is really blessed to be able to live in this corner of the province. And I don't say that about everywhere I go. I mean, there's lots of great places around the province, but here it is just so spectacular because you've got so much. But I tell you, that's a real challenge because the NDP had taken so much and it made it so difficult for people to be able to live. I mean, think about this. A province that has all these resources, that has all this potential, that has a well-trained, well-educated population, and 1/3 of British Columbians is thinking about leaving this province. Worse, 1 in 2 youth are thinking about leaving this province. That's our future. That is what we should be focused on, is allowing those people to be able to build their lives and build it here, right here in this area, the Sunshine Coast, but also anywhere in the province. But people are leaving because they've lost hope. They've lost the ability to see how they can build a future. And I mean, who can blame them? I mean, we've got huge problems with crime and with drugs. We've got huge problems, of course, with our healthcare system. Even our education system is in decline. Our resource sector is in a disastrous state. There's so much that is going wrong now in British Columbia. So how do we fix all these things? Well, we just have to get back to the basics. We just have to get back to focusing on people and just trying to bring common sense change back into British Columbia. So we're going to do that. We're going to get rid of the carbon tax. I mean, it's $3.5 billion from people's lives that is happening, and the government is just taking it and using it for a slush fund for projects. Enough is enough. Let's get that back into people's pockets. Because you need 3 things to be able to survive in this province. You need a place to live, you need food, and you need energy. And right now, the government is taxing taxing the crap out of all of that. I mean, it's just crazy. So let's get rid of the carbon tax. Let's try to drive down our energy costs. And when it comes to food, we actually only procure 34% of the food that we consume from British Columbia. 2/3 of the food we need comes from outside our borders. That leaves us vulnerable. And the government should be looking after people, should be looking after our future, not leaving us vulnerable. So we need to double food production in this province. We need to do a much better job of managing water to be able to do that. And when it comes for housing, there's so much that needs to be done. We got a government today that is pointing at everybody but themselves. I mean, they started off saying it's foreigners, then they said it's speculators, then they said it's vacant properties, and now they've said it's Airbnbs. None of that is true. The reality is government has made it too difficult to be able to build housing in this province. And we are way behind in terms of it. So we've got a huge shortage. We've got 0.1% vacancy rate in BC. And I guess, maybe David Eby's solution for housing is to say that 1/3 of British Columbia's going to leave, so we don't need to build any more houses. That's not my plan. I want to be able to make sure people can have an affordable place to live. So we're going to make sure that we get out of the way. We're going to clean up all of the bureaucracy and the delays. We're going to clean up the building code to drive down the costs. I mean, these new building code that they brought in is adding between $30,000 and $80,000 to the cost of building a new home. And we have an affordability problem. Like, this doesn't make any sense to do this at all. So we're going to clean up a whole bunch of that stuff. We're going to make sure that we can get housing built in this province, just like it has been in the past. But I think the most important thing to think about, though, certainly for here and up in the area I represent, is our resource sector. I mean, our forest sector is the highest cost producer. Just today, Canfor announced the permanent closure of the mill up in Fort St. John. Of course, they closed the mill in my riding, and they're looking at, quite frankly, just leaving British Columbia entirely. Analysts are saying that our forest assets in BC are being valued at zero. At zero. Remember, this used to be the backbone of British Columbia. It used to be what allowed so much development and so much opportunity, and they're being valued at zero. And I asked them, I said, well, why? And he said, because if you can't sell an asset, it's not worth anything. There's no value that they can put on there. So I went and talked to the forest companies, and I thought, okay, how do we fix this? Well, they got a whole bunch of suggestions. And I said, no. How do we fix this to make sure people can go back to work? How do we make sure we fix this so that people can earn good wages and have a future? How do we fix this so that contractors can be able to carry on with the work that needs to be done? And most importantly, how do we fix it so that companies can be able to be profitable and pay better wages? Because that's what we have to deal with to get rid of issues of affordability. So I talked about a number of things, and what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to go to a single project, single permit. We're going to get rid of all this layers of bureaucracy and process and delays, and just get back to delivering on services for people so that they can actually get to work. And I'll give you an example. In Merritt, there's big wildfires that went through that area. There's probably 1 million cubic meters or more of wood that is being burnt, that needs to be harvested, that needs to be site prepped, that needs to be planted, all that rehabilitation work to be done. It's 3 years, and they managed to get, I think, 3, maybe 4 permits. They can't get wood, so they're up and down in terms of running, affecting the lives of people and the communities. Yet you go to the other side of the border, into Alberta, in areas where they have big wildfires, they get permits within 3 weeks. 3 weeks after the fire, they're in there, they're harvesting, they're doing the site prep, they're planting, they're building the future. Why aren't we doing this? It's crazy. We're just locked up in so much bureaucracy and process. It's got to come to an end. We just have to get back to the basics. And same thing when I think about mining. In mining in British Columbia today, there are 17 mines that are either permitted or about to be permitted. Those 17 mines represent a $38 billion investment, represent creating between 20 and 30,000 jobs at an average wage and benefit of $138,000 a year, and will add over $800 billion to British Columbia's GDP over the life of those mines. This is desperately needed in British Columbia. We've just got to get government out of the way. We've got to lock this in, and we've got to get these things happening in British Columbia. So I want to talk about a couple other things. Getting the economy going is a big piece because we need the revenue. We need to be able to bring down that $8 billion deficit, a 10% deficit that they're running, which is completely unsustainable. But most importantly, we need to be able to invest in healthcare, in education. We need to be able to invest certainly in dealing with addictions and crime. And we can't tax people any further. Matter of fact, we got to figure out how we reduce people's taxes. So, healthcare I want to talk about because it is big for every community around this province. And I know the Sunshine Coast is no different. I mean, just last weekend, I think we had 5 different communities where their ERs closed. Wait times are frequently between 10 and 12 hours in emergency rooms. 1 million people in this province don't have family doctors. So what can we do? The biggest thing we need to do is we need to understand that the system itself has failed. The system has failed. It is in a crisis. And when that happens, you can't just throw more money at it and expect a different result. I mean, that's the definition of insanity. What we need to do is we need to look at models that work much better. So we're looking at European models that are universal health care, just like us, single payer, the government pays for the services, but we buy the services from both government and non-government agencies. And by doing that, you better utilize the professionals, but the key there is we want the funding to be focused on the patient. So today, for example, a hospital might have $1 billion budget, and if they're short funding, what they do is they cut beds, they reduce services to cover their costs. But if you had the model where the funding is following the patient, if there are shortfall in terms of budget, they have to figure out how to expand services for patients so they can generate more revenue. It's a completely different way of thinking about how you do healthcare. But by doing this, we can better utilize professionals. And so that's going to be a big focus for us as a government to make those kind of shifts. Along with that, I mean, there's lots we need to do on training for nurses, as well as doctors and other healthcare professionals, and especially for underserviced communities. We want to make sure that we put in enough incentive in place to be able to get doctors and other healthcare professionals to serve in the communities that desperately need it. Lots of people want to work in Victoria or Vancouver. We need people here in Powell River. We need people in my community of Vanderhoof and Prince George. We need people all over the province. So we've got to figure out how to make sure we balance that. One of the big pieces is when you get a new doctor that comes into this country, it can take up to 4 years for that doctor to be qualified to be able to work here in British Columbia. Think about that. I was talking with a family, a husband and wife team, both doctors. She's a general practitioner, he's a surgeon. And so they decided that she would go first to get qualified. So she spent 4 years qualifying. Well, he took a labor job, and he spent 6 months of his year in India doing surgeries. He's a highly trained, highly skilled surgeon. So 4 years later, she's now a practicing general practitioner, and now it's his turn to go through a 4-year process. 8 years that person could have been working and providing services here in British Columbia. 8 years is what it took. That to me is just so unacceptable. We have to be able to clean that process up. So what we're going to do, quite frankly, is we're going to take control of our own immigration from Ottawa. We're going to work with foreign training institutions in foreign countries to make sure that we recognize the skills and the training, to find the gaps, talk about how we can fill those gaps, whether it's additional training or whether it's changes that can happen within those facilities, so that when they come to British Columbia, they can get straight into the workforce. They can come straight in, and that is whether they're a teacher or a doctor or a nurse or even a carpenter or electrician, because we need them. And it just comes back to housing on that as well. I'll just touch on this again for a second. When I talked to the companies about how to do more housing, I said, look, we got to double housing starts. So we got to clean up permits, and we got to do all these things. And they said, but the problem is we don't have the people. That's a big problem. You can't build houses if you don't have people that are qualified to build the houses. So this is a big step of what we need to do. And it's just like our healthcare system. We can't change the healthcare system unless we have the people that need to do it. And the government is saying, oh, we're going to build a new hospital here, we're going to build a new facility here. And that's great, we need the facilities. But if you don't have the staff, I've got a hospital that's being built in my riding, should open up late this year or early next year. And it's going to have to open up at 1/3 capacity. Doesn't have the staff. That's a real problem. So that's healthcare. And like I say, it's bold to say that we can make changes. The best part about it is we can do all of those changes within the Canada Health Act, so we're not going to run afoul with the federal government on this. We don't need changes there. We can be in control of our own destiny in terms of being able to provide those healthcare services in BC. Touch on crime and mental health in particular. We're going to bring an end to the safe supply and decriminalization. It makes no sense whatsoever to be able to be doing that. I mean, I can hardly believe that Bonnie Henry, who is a representative government, who is working on government's behalf, goes to Ottawa and says that we should be able to safe supply drugs in the grocery store for people to be able to pick up. That we should just double down and do more of decriminalization. I looked at that, I can tell you, as a conservative government, if we had a health officer doing that in Ottawa, she'd be fired the next day. I mean, that's just it. And by the way, Bonnie Henry will not have a position in a conservative government. And we're going to end those mandates. We're going to make sure not only in the mandates, we're going to get rid of these ridiculous restrictions on our healthcare workers that they put in place now, so that we can hire back our healthcare workers that were fired. And quite frankly, we're going to put together a committee that's going to examine the situations and decide and determine the compensation that should be required for them. People have been treated unfairly, and quite frankly, when the government does that, government should step up to the plate and treat them properly. So that's what we will do. So getting back to the drug situation, you know, the experts are telling me that we have the highest number of addicts per capita anywhere in North America. And you look at this, you think, wow, you look at San Francisco and the mess that's in there, and other communities in North America, you think, that's where we're going? That is where British Columbia is. And you look in every community in the province, at the 10 cities, people living on the street, people doing drugs on the street, you can see that is where we're going with this policy. So we'll bring that to an end, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a very strict or very solid policy around getting people into recovery. We're going to build everything from doctor-prescribed treatment to short-term treatment and recovery to long-term recovery, because it's not just about getting people off the addiction, you also have to be able to help them on a path for recovery, to help them with life skills, to help them break their pattern so that they can get out and be able to function in society. We're also, quite frankly, going to look at involuntary recovery, involuntary treatment and recovery, because there are people, quite frankly, if somebody ODs, and they're brought back to life, clearly from a mental health perspective, they are not capable of making the right decisions for themselves. And so as government, I think it's our responsibility to step up and do what we can, the best we can for those people. So we'll have care that they can go into so they can get clean, they'll have recovery, and they'll have an opportunity to be able to build a productive life. But there's something else we need to be thinking about in terms of mandatory care. So a family with 2 children, a 14-year-old and 11-year-old, both of them were addicted. And they had no options in British Columbia because the children did not want to go in and get treated. They did not want to go into recovery. So what they did is they had to take out a second mortgage on their home, and they spent $20,000 per person south of the border. Good news is they're back, they're clean. The first one is now off into university. The second one is graduating this year. And they're both clean, both have on a healthy path. Why is it that British Columbia doesn't have that option? If you have an 11-year-old daughter and she has an addiction, as a parent, you would want to do everything you can to be able to help get them clean and get them on a path so that they can have a productive life, so that they can have opportunities, so they can have hope for a future. And as a government, we should make sure that option is there and available. So that's what we will have set up within society as well. And the last piece we have to deal with addiction is we need long-term care, long-term treatment. And what I mean by that is there are people today who are damaged beyond repair. And I don't know any better way to say it. But the drugs that are on the street today, doctors tell me within 2 to 3 years can cause permanent brain damage. That's how dangerous these drugs are. So for some reason the government calls these things safe. Absolutely ludicrous. So we need to be thinking about those people. I don't think as a government that it is right for us to say it's okay for them to be living on a street. It's okay for them to be having that kind of lifestyle because they cannot function in society. I actually think we need to be able to say, let's provide them the best level of services we can to provide them with a quality of life. And so we're going to have to look at long-term care. And that's, we'll likely get challenged on that in terms of human rights thing, but I think it's just the right thing to do as a society, to be able to look after people who cannot look after themselves, to be able to look after people who need that government help. So we're gonna do that. We'll put those things in place. Now it's going to take a little bit of time, but I can tell you one of the first things that we're going to do, we are not going to allow a vending machine outside of a hospital that dispenses crack pipes and snorting kits and gives instructions to kids how to use them. I mean, this is just ludicrous. How a government could think that is the right thing to do, and then suddenly David Eby gets some pushback and says, oh no, we're going to review it. We're going to review whether we should be doing that. Look, this is a guy who's come out very clearly and said he supports all of this. And the only reason why he's changing it now is because he's feeling some political heat. That to me is completely wrong in terms of it. So, That's how we'll deal with that. I want to talk about crime and then maybe touch on one other topic and we'll get into some questions and answers. So, police are telling me today that 20% of the people are causing 80% of the crime. People are getting emboldened in our society to do more and more crime. Because they commit one crime, they get a slap on the wrist, or they just, ignored or let out, so they look at it and say, oh, well, maybe I can do this as well. Maybe I can do that as well. And so you end up with these people that are being trained by us as society that there's no consequences for criminal activity. And that has to change. So we are going to work with the federal government to fix the bail reform that's needed, but we're also going to work with the federal government to ask them to implement guaranteed minimum sentencing. There needs to be a punishment for people committing crimes. We cannot just have them rotating out on the street. And just today or just yesterday, there was a case in Vancouver where a mentally health issue with a history of violence, numerous records, numerous arrests by the police, randomly killed a stranger and cut off somebody else's hand. I know the police are torn up when they see people like that back out on the street, because government has failed to be able to put these guys behind bars. There was a family in Surrey that I spoke with a few weeks ago, the Dunn family, and then once again, a violent offender with weapons history was led out back on the street with a slap on the wrist through the bail system, went into their home and killed their daughter. This is so unacceptable in our society. So we're going to push for a minimum sentence, we're going to push for dealing with those sort of changes. But I tell you, there's another thing that I think we need to do. If our criminal system, our legal system cannot put people behind bars like this, then we will use the Mental Health Act. If somebody is at risk of harming themselves or others, they can be held and treated and not released until they were no longer a risk in society. We need to do these things because it's just the right thing to do. And I tell you what, there's going to be people, when we put that in place, there will be people that will make the argument saying, you're taking away their rights. As a government, you're taking away their rights. You can't do that under Section 7 of the Constitution. And I can tell you, if we end up in that situation where somebody does that, I'm not afraid to use the notwithstanding clause, because we need to make sure our streets are safe. So one last thing I want to just touch on in terms of this, because believe me, there's a lot that needs to be done. There's lots of other topics that we could go into in terms of this. But I just want to start by saying thank you to Chris for stepping up to the plate. I mean, Chris is a really good guy. His heart is in the right place, and I'm just so honored when he came over and joined us. And I can tell you, because he was with the other guys, and I was with the other guys too. It was easy for me. I got booted out. But Chris came voluntarily. Chris came over voluntarily because he, like me, wants to see just that common sense return to BC. He wants to see people that can fight for their riding. And so it's one of the things I'm going to ask Chris to do on day one of the election, is I want him to take a pledge that his number one priority will always be his riding, speaking on behalf of his riding, and voting on behalf of his riding. He will not be whipped and forced to vote the way against his conscience. Now, having said that, as a Conservative Party, we obviously have to get things done. We can't have 93 people all voting in different directions. So we do have to get together and get things done. But what is important for his riding and what is important for the stance and representing his people, I will never say to him, no, you can't vote that way. Because that's why I got kicked out. I got kicked out of the BC Liberal Party because I dared to say that the climate policy and approach that the federal government was doing was going to hurt my riding. And I needed to stand up and support my farmers in my riding. And I wasn't allowed to say that. And so I said to Kevin Falcon at the time, I said, look, my riding's got to come first. And he said, fine, if you can't toe our party line in wanting to be climate leaders, which was their position at the time, then you can't be part of our caucus. Hung up, half an hour later I was booted out of caucus. But you have to be able to stand up for what's right for your riding and fight for it. And even though that may cause some problems, it is why you're elected. You're elected to be a representative. So, Couple quick things on that. How do you make sure that a government is not just giving a spin? How do you make sure that, what I'm saying to you is going to be enacted on? What we're going to do as government is we're going to get rid of freedom of information requests. And we're going to do that because we are going to make everything that can be made available publicly available. And the job of the Freedom of Information Officer is going to be say what can't be made public. And by doing this, you will have the facts. The people will have the information that is the people's information. And you'll be able to judge political parties and governments based on facts, not based on the spin and the political rhetoric that we have been so used to for many decades. It will change politics forever in British Columbia, and it's just the right thing to do. So we're going to make sure we get that done. The other thing that I'm super keen on is we actually need to do some direct democracy. We can't obviously do that for everything. That's why you elect a representative to represent your riding. But I actually think we need to be able to go to the people on some big issues. So that's another thing that I'm going to do is we're going to pass legislation that's going to say there can be no new taxes and no increased taxes except by referendum. Governments need to make the case, come to the people and say, please give us more money because we want to spend it properly.
You better be careful, that brought down California.
You're right. I mean, look, we got some challenges. I started off by saying the budget problems that we have and the challenges we have in government and the fact that we need to do some significant tax relief as well. So this is not going to be easy. But the way out of this is not irresponsible spending. The way out of this is to be respectful of taxpayers, making sure that the money is being spent properly, and to grow the economy. This used to be, like I say, a land where people could build a future. We've got all the resources we could ever want. All of you, and quite frankly, everybody in this province came from somewhere else, whether it was 7 generations ago or even much, much longer, or whether it was just last week. People came here to build a future. They came here because they knew that they could build a future for themselves, for their children, and for their grandchildren, and leave a legacy for them, give them that opportunity of hope. The fact that 1 in 2 people, youth, are thinking about leaving tells us that all of that is now gone. People can't build a future here. And that's what we want to do as Conservative Party. We want to stay laser focused on making sure that people's quality of life is going to be able to be there, that they're going to be able to build that future, and that as parents and grandparents, you're not going to have to say to your kids, I'm sorry that you have to leave, but there's nothing I could have done. Because there is something we can do. We can change how things are going in this province. We can drive down those cost structures. We can get out of the way. And quite frankly, this is going to be a slogan really. We're just going to get shit done. And that's just all there is to it. So, with that, like I said, I'm so honored to have Chris as part of it, and I want to thank the volunteers that have been working to help put this together and that are working on this campaign. I encourage everybody to get involved in one way or another. This is a grassroots movement. We're not going to have the money that the other guys have to fight the campaign. We're going to raise some money and we're going to run a good campaign. But these guys have got tons of money. They rigged the election rules to give themselves $8 million to fight this campaign. And we get 200,000, just over 200,000. They rigged the rules against us. They've taken your tax dollars to fight for this ideology and for this destructive policies that this government is doing. So we're going to push back, but the only way this is going to work is grassroots. You have to talk to friends and neighbors, you have to get them engaged, you have to get them, make sure they come out and vote. You can spend a few hours helping Chris out as a volunteer in the campaign, encourage other people in the riding and maybe in other ridings to get involved as well. And of course, if you can donate, that's great. It'd be great to be able to make sure Chris is a fully funded campaign and that we can do the best we can to counter what the NDP is doing. But this is how we have to win. And it's the only way that can happen. And the good news is, people around the province are sick and tired of David Eby. People in the province are joining us in droves. It is great to be able to see the grassroots movement that's happening, especially with younger people. They want change. So be part of that change. Help Chris out, get involved in the campaigns. And I tell you something, if we do that, we are going to change this province forever. The last time a Conservative government was formed in British Columbia was almost 100 years ago. 1927, 1928. The last time it elected anybody was the 1970s. we're already making history, quite frankly, and we need to just go that next step and make sure that we send David Eby and his crew out the door, let it hit him on the backside on the way out, and let's bring in a common sense government and change that would be better for everybody. Thanks everybody for coming out. I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much. I have a number of questions here. We have fantastic